They thought she was just scrubbing toilets. Big mistake. Because when they locked down the hotel, they didn't trap her. They trapped themselves in with her.
The Grand Sterling Hotel was the kind of place where the air smelled like old money and new arrogance. It was the chosen venue for the Global Peace Summit, hosting 3 presidents and a dozen foreign diplomats. And at the bottom of this golden food chain was Elena. She was 45, wearing a gray uniform that was 2 sizes too big, with hair pulled back in a severe fraying bun. To the guests, she wasn't a person. She was furniture that breathed. Elena was currently on her knees in the hallway of the presidential suite, scrubbing a wine stain out of the plush, hand-woven carpet. Her manager, Mr. Henderson, a man whose cheap cologne arrived 5 minutes before he did, loomed over her. He wasn't alone. A young, arrogant diplomat's aide was with him, sneering at the wet spot on the rug. "It's unacceptable, Henderson," the aide snapped, kicking the side of Elena's cleaning cart. "The president arrives in 2 hours. I don't want to see this creature anywhere near the VIPs." Henderson turned to Elena, his face red with performative rage. "You hear that, Elena? You are invisible today. If I see you, you're fired. If a guest sees you, you're fired. Now finish this and get back to the service tunnels where you belong." Elena didn't flinch. She didn't look up. She simply dipped her scrub brush into the bucket of soapy water, the chemicals stinging her cracked hands. "Yes, Mr. Henderson," she whispered, her accent thick and deliberate. She kept her head down, offering a submissive, broken smile. It was a perfect performance. Underneath that gray uniform, her heart rate hadn't climbed a single beat. She analyzed the aide's shoes, Italian leather, slippery on marble. She noted Henderson's keycard dangling loosely from his belt. She saw threats and weaknesses where others saw luxury. But today, she was just the help. She finished the spot, gathered her bucket, and faded into the background, exactly as ordered. The takeover didn't happen with an explosion. It happened with a terrifying, synchronized silence. At 7 p.m., the summit's opening gala began in the Diamond Ballroom. Champagne flowed, and security was tight, or so everyone thought. The invaders, a high-end mercenary group known as the Black Syndicate, didn't breach the front doors. They were already inside. Disguised as the A/V tech crew and the catering staff, they moved with mechanical precision. The moment the lead violinist hit a high note, the caterers reached under their serving trays. Suppressed P-90 submachine guns appeared as if by magic. In the security control room, 3 guards were watching the monitors, bored out of their minds. The door hissed open. Before they could turn their chairs, 2 rounds of silenced fire took out the men on the left and right. The head of security reached for his radio, but a knife, thrown with Olympic velocity, pinned his hand to the desk. The leader of the invasion team, a hulking man named Vargas, stepped into the light. He wore a tuxedo that struggled to contain his muscle mass. "Cut the feeds," Vargas commanded, his voice like grinding gravel. "Seal the exits. Initiate the jamming protocol." Within 60 seconds, the Grand Sterling Hotel went dark electronically. Cell phones stopped working. The elevators locked down. The heavy magnetic locks on the ballroom doors slammed shut, trapping 3 world leaders and 200 of the wealthiest people on Earth inside. The security detail in the ballroom was neutralized before they could unholster their weapons. It was a masterclass in violence. The lobby was empty, save for the bodies of the doormen being dragged behind the concierge desk. The hotel was no longer a place of luxury. It was a fortress, and Vargas held the keys. Elena was in the worst possible place at the worst possible time, or perhaps the best depending on your perspective. She was in the utility closet on the mezzanine level, refilling her supply of paper towels, when the lockdown klaxons triggered a silent vibration in the floor. She felt the shift in air pressure as the HVAC systems were overridden. She cracked the door of the closet just an inch. Through the gap, she had a clear line of sight to the mezzanine balcony overlooking the lobby. She saw a team of 4 men, tactical gear strapped over black turtlenecks, moving in a diamond formation. They weren't moving like police. They were moving like hunters. She watched as they executed a straggler, a guest who had been late to the party, with a double tap to the chest. No hesitation. No warning. Elena pulled back, her breath caught in her throat. She looked at the service elevator. The red light indicated it was disabled. She checked the stairwell door next to her closet. It was maglocked from the outside. She was trapped in a 10-foot section of the service corridor that connected the kitchen storage to the staff bathrooms. The realization hit her hard. She was unarmed. She was wearing a polyester uniform that rustled when she moved. Her only tools were a mop, a bucket, and a cart full of industrial cleaning supplies. She could hear the muffled screams from the ballroom below. She knew what was happening. This wasn't a robbery. It was a political execution. For a brief second, the cleaning lady persona flickered. Her eyes, usually dull and submissive, sharpened into predatory slits. Her posture straightened. The slouch of the tired worker vanished, replaced by the coiled tension of a viper. She wasn't trapped with them. They were trapped with her. Elena needed intel, and she needed it fast. She knew she couldn't take on a squad of paramilitaries in a direct firefight, not with a spray bottle. She needed to become the ghost they already thought she was. She quietly slid the ceiling tile above her head to the side. The hotel's ventilation system was old, but the ducts were wide enough for a human to crawl through if they weren't claustrophobic. Luckily, Elena hadn't felt fear in 2 decades. She pulled herself up into the dusty darkness, her muscles remembering the strain of pull-ups she used to do in the Negev desert. She crawled silently, counting her movements to match the rhythm of the building's humming generator so her noise would be masked. She made her way to a vent grate overlooking the main kitchen. Below, Vargas was setting up his command post. He had dragged the hotel manager, Mr. Henderson, into the center of the room. "How many exits in the basement?" Vargas demanded, pressing a pistol to Henderson's forehead. "T2, Henderson stammered, weeping. "Just the laundry chute and the delivery bay." "And the service tunnels?" They connect to the metro. But you need a keycard." Elena watched, memorizing their positions. There were 6 hostiles in the kitchen. She noted their loadouts: ceramic body armor, encrypted radios, night vision goggles. She closed her eyes and visualized the blueprints of the hotel. She knew this building better than the architect did. She knew which floorboards creaked on the 3rd floor. She knew the service elevator had a manual override hatch on the roof of the car. She realized their plan. They weren't just going to kill the presidents. They were rigging the gas lines. She saw one of the mercenaries unpacking C4 and placing it near the industrial stoves. If that went off, the entire building would collapse. She had to stop them. But first, she needed a weapon. She looked at her cleaning cart left behind in the hallway. It wasn't an armory, but for a Mossad chemist, it was close enough. Elena dropped back down into the utility closet. She could hear footsteps approaching. 2 mercenaries were doing a sweep of the floor. She had maybe 2 minutes before they opened the door and put a bullet in her head. She looked at the bottles on her cart. Bleach, sodium hypochlorite. Toilet bowl cleaner, ammonia. Every housewife knows you never mix them. Every soldier knows why. When combined, they create chloramine gas, a toxic vapor that burns the respiratory tract, causes fluid buildup in the lungs, and can be fatal within moments in a confined space. Elena worked with terrifying speed. She grabbed a heavy-duty trash bag and taped it over the vents in the small utility room to seal the airflow. Then, she took a plastic bucket and poured the entire gallon of ammonia into it. She tied a string around the handle of the bleach bottle and rigged it to the doorknob. She scrambled up the shelving unit, wedging herself into the gap between the top shelf and the ceiling, pulling a wet rag over her mouth and nose. The footsteps stopped outside. The handle turned. As the mercenary kicked the door open, the tension on the string yanked the bleach bottle down. It tumbled into the bucket of ammonia. The reaction was instant. A thick white cloud of caustic gas erupted upwards. The first mercenary walked right into the plume. He didn't even have time to scream. He gagged, clutching his throat as his lungs seized up. The second man rushed in to grab him, inhaling a massive dose of the vapor. Their eyes burned, blinding them. They collapsed, coughing up blood and foam, thrashing on the floor. Elena waited 10 seconds, holding her breath, then dropped down. She stepped over their convulsing bodies, grabbed a radio, a combat knife, and a 9mm pistol from the lead man's holster. She didn't look back. The cleaning lady had just clocked in. "Team 2, check in." Vargas's voice crackled over the radio Elena had clipped to her belt. She didn't answer. She knew silence was louder than words right now. Vargas waited. "Team 2." Nothing but static. Vargas signaled 2 of his elite guards. "Go check the mezzanine. Someone's playing games." When the guards arrived at the utility closet, the gas had dissipated, vented out into the hallway. They found their comrades dead, their faces purple and swollen, eyes wide with agony. But it was the condition of the bodies that chilled them. They weren't shot. They were liquidated. "Boss," one guard whispered into his comms, his voice trembling. "They're down. No gunshot wounds. It looks like chemical warfare. But makeshift." Vargas narrowed his eyes. "Who is on that floor?" "Nobody. Just a janitor's cart." Vargas paused. He was a smart man. He knew the variables. A janitor. Cleaning supplies. A vein pulsed in his temple. He realized the mistake he had made. He had accounted for the Secret Service. He had accounted for the police. He hadn't accounted for the help. "Find her," Vargas growled, his voice echoing in the silent kitchen. "It's the maid. She's in the walls. Hunt her down. I want her head on a platter." Elena, listening through the earpiece, tightened her grip on the pistol. She was currently moving through the cramped laundry chute, sliding down toward the basement. She heard the order. They knew she existed now. The element of surprise was gone. Now it was a hunt. But they didn't realize that in this hotel, she wasn't the prey. She was the exterminator. Elena knew she couldn't win a shooting war. There were 30 of them and one of her. She needed to break their minds before she broke their bodies. She reached the basement maintenance room, the heart of the hotel's infrastructure. She found the main breaker panel. It was a massive wall of switches and levers. She didn't just cut the power. That would be too simple. She needed chaos. She hot-wired the fire alarm system to the lighting grid. Upstairs, the hotel plunged into darkness. Then, the emergency strobes began to flash. Blinding, rhythmic bursts of white light. Flash. Dark. Flash. Dark. It was disorienting, designed to induce nausea and panic. Simultaneously, she triggered the fire suppression system, but only in the hallways. Sprinklers erupted, soaking the mercenaries and filling the corridors with a heavy mist that rendered their thermal optics useless. Then came the sound. Elena accessed the PA system. She didn't speak. She didn't make threats. She simply placed the microphone next to the industrial laundry machine that was unbalanced, creating a rhythmic, thumping, metallic boom, 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 that echoed through the entire building like a giant mechanical heartbeat. The mercenaries were rattled. They were wet, blinded by strobes, and listening to a ghostly drumbeat. Elena moved through the mist like a wraith. On the 3rd floor, a guard was frantically wiping his night vision goggles. Elena stepped out of a service alcove behind him. She didn't use the gun. She used the high-pressure hose from a fire extinguisher, blasting him in the face with freezing CO2 before knocking him unconscious with the heavy canister. She vanished back into the shadows before his body hit the wet floor. Terror began to spread through the radio channels. "She's everywhere," one mercenary screamed. "I can't see anything." Vargas had enough. The plan was falling apart. His men were panicked, the building was a disco from hell, and the authorities were breaching the perimeter. He grabbed the primary target, the U.S. president, and dragged him toward the penthouse helipad. "Move!" Vargas shouted, shoving the president into the elevator. He kept 2 of his best men with him. They ascended to the top floor, the presidential suite. Elena was already there. She had climbed the elevator shaft cables, hand over hand, beating the car to the top floor by sheer will. Her hands were bleeding, her uniform torn, revealing the scars of old bullet wounds on her shoulder. When the elevator doors opened, Vargas stepped out into the lavish suite, and stopped. The room was quiet. The strobes hadn't reached here. Elena stood in the center of the room. She held no gun. In her hand, she held a shard of jagged crystal from a smashed $50,000 chandelier. "End of shift," she said, her voice raspy but steady. Vargas laughed, raising his assault rifle. "You're the nuisance? A cleaning lady." He fired. Elena moved with a speed that defied her age. She slid across the polished floor, kicking a heavy marble bust of Caesar into Vargas's knees. He buckled. His two guards fired, but Elena used the heavy velvet curtains as a shield, tangling one guard in the fabric before stabbing the crystal shard into his thigh. It was brutal, ugly combat. Elena fought dirty. She bit, she gouged eyes, she used a silver serving tray to deflect a knife thrust. Vargas managed to backhand her, sending her crashing into a glass display case. She fell dazed. Vargas loomed over her, gun pointed at her chest. "Who are you?" Elena looked up, blood trickling down her forehead. She grabbed a can of aerosol furniture polish she had stashed under the table and a golden lighter from the coffee table. "I'm the one who cleans up the trash." She flicked the lighter and sprayed the aerosol. A massive fireball engulfed Vargas. He screamed, dropping his weapon, flailing backward out the shattered window and onto the balcony. The chaos ended as abruptly as it began. SWAT teams rappelled through the skylights, shattering the remaining glass. Federal agents. "Drop your weapons." The room filled with armored officers. The president, shaken but alive, cowered behind a sofa. The police found Elena sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall, catching her breath. She had wiped the blood from her face with a silk napkin. She looked small again. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her exhausted. "Hands in the air!" A SWAT officer screamed, aiming his rifle at her. "Wait!" A commanding voice cut through the noise. It was the director of the Secret Service, storming into the room. He looked at the carnage, the burnt villain on the balcony, the neutralized guards, the makeshift weapons. He looked at Elena. He didn't see a maid. He stopped, his eyes widening in disbelief. He signaled his men to lower their weapons. "Yarel," the director whispered. "Yarel Ben David." Elena looked at him, her eyes weary. "It's Elena now, sir. Just Elena." The hotel manager, Henderson, had been brought up by the police to identify staff. He stood in the doorway, mouth agape. He looked at the invisible woman he had berated earlier that day. The woman who had single-handedly dismantled a terror squad. She works in housekeeping," Henderson stammered, his worldview collapsing. The president stepped forward, brushing dust off his suit. He looked at Elena with profound respect. She just saved the free world with a can of furniture polish. The aftermath was a frenzy of flashing lights and news crews. The rain had started to pour, washing the blood from the sidewalks of D.C. Elena stood by the ambulance, a paramedic checking her cuts. The Secret Service director approached her, holding a card. "We could use you back in the game, Yarel. You know the agency never really forgot you. Full reinstatement. Pension. A life where you don't have to scrub toilets." Elena looked at the card, then at the hotel. She saw the other maids huddled together, crying, safe because of what she did. She looked at her hands. Rough, calloused, cleaner's hands. "I like the quiet," she said softly. "And I like my job. Things get dirty. I make them clean. It's honest." She refused the ride to the hospital. She refused the press interview. She walked over to Mr. Henderson, who flinched as she approached. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her name tag. "I quit," she said simply. "And Henderson, use the enzyme cleaner for the wine stains. It works better." She turned and walked away into the heavy rain, her gray uniform blending into the night. She didn't look like a hero. She didn't look like a super spy. She just looked like a woman going home after a very long shift. The end.